A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
Herman, there is a profound irony in the story we are looking at today. We are talking about a community that survived the 1915 Armenian genocide, outlasted the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, weathered the 1948 and 1967 wars, and has maintained a continuous presence in Jerusalem since the 4th century. And yet, after 1,600 years of endurance, they are currently facing what many community leaders describe as an existential threat, not from a foreign invasion or a world war, but from a high-stakes real estate deal involving a luxury hotel, a secret contract, and a developer with a very questionable resume.
It is a classic canary in the coal mine scenario for the old city of Jerusalem. Today's prompt from Daniel asks us to dive into the Armenian community struggle, specifically focusing on the Cow's Garden land deal. When you walk through the Armenian Quarter, it feels different from the rest of the old city. It is quieter, more residential, almost monastic. It is an ancient enclave of stone and history. But lately, that quiet has been replaced by the sound of legal battles and physical confrontations. As of today, March 16, 2026, the community is essentially under siege by a combination of private development interests and municipal financial pressure.
The Cow's Garden deal, or Gavoru Bardes. It sounds almost pastoral, doesn't it? Like a quiet corner where you might find a few goats grazing. But, in reality, it is the largest open plot of land within the Ottoman walls of Jerusalem, aside from the Temple Mount itself. It is prime real estate in one of the most contested square kilometers on Earth. Herman, for those who haven't been following the updates in the Armenian Weekly or Syriac press over the last few years, let's set the stage. Who are the Armenians of Jerusalem, and why is their position so unique?
To understand the stakes, you have to understand that the Armenians are not just another group in the mosaic of the old city. They were the first nation to adopt Christianity as a state religion in 301 AD, and their monks followed shortly after. They have been there for 1,600 years. Today, the Armenian Quarter occupies about 126 dunams, which is roughly 14% of the old city's total area. But here is the kicker: their population has plummeted. In 1948, there were about 16,000 Armenians in Jerusalem. Today, that number is somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000.
That is a staggering demographic decline, and it makes the physical footprint of the quarter even more vital. If you only have 1,500 people left, your land is your primary defense against being erased. We have talked about the complexity of identity in this region before, specifically in episode 12 and 60, where we looked at Arab identity in Israel. But the Armenians occupy this fascinating third space, don't they?
They're in a legal and political limbo. Most Armenian Jerusalemites hold permanent resident status, the same as the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. They are not Israeli citizens, but they aren't exactly part of the binary Israeli-Palestinian conflict either. Their traditional political stance is what some call a quiet consensus. They generally argue that the old city should be treated as an international space, governed by all three Abrahamic faiths, rather than being under the exclusive sovereignty of one side. Many identify as Palestinian Armenians, but as a community, they try to maintain a neutrality that allows them to protect their holy sites. But as we are seeing with the Cow's Garden, that neutrality is becoming impossible to maintain when the ground is literally being sold out from under them.
So let's get into the mechanics of how that happened. This is where the story turns into a legal thriller. In July of 2021, a deal was signed that changed everything, but the community didn't even know about it for 2 years. How does a patriarchate sign away 25% of its land in secret?
It is a failure of governance on a massive scale. In July 2021, the Armenian Patriarch, Archbishop Nurhan Manouchian, signed a 98-year lease with a company called Zana Gardens. The lease covers the cow's garden, which, as we mentioned, is about 25% of the entire Armenian Quarter. This isn't just an empty field. The land houses the Armenian Seminary, one of only 3 in the world, along with community halls, the Patriarch's private garden, and 5 family residences. The plan was to build a luxury hotel with about 70 high-end suites right next to the Zion Gate.
And the Patriarch did this without consulting the Holy Synod or the wider community? This feels like a total bypass of the internal checks and balances that are supposed to protect these ancient institutions.
The community only started finding out the details in 2023 when the news began to leak, and when the details came out, they were horrifying to the residents. A 98-year lease in Jerusalem is effectively a sale. It covers multiple generations. A fact-finding report released in July of 2023 by international lawyers from the US and Armenia revealed that the contract was incredibly lopsided. It essentially hollowed out the heart of the community to benefit a private developer.
And let's talk about that developer, because this is where the weird in my weird prompts really kicks in. The man behind Xana Gardens is an Australian-Israeli businessman named Danny Rothman, though he also goes by the name Daniel Rubenstein. Herman, what do we know about his background?
It is colorful, to put it mildly. An investigation by the New Arab found that Rothman's LinkedIn profile claimed he had a degree from the London School of Economics. When the school was contacted, they had no record of anyone by either of his names ever graduating from there. Even more concerning, back in 2016, he was actually fined by regulators in Cyprus for falsifying academic credentials in a different business context. This is the man the Patriarchate chose to hand over a quarter of their ancestral land to. It raises massive questions about due diligence, or the lack thereof.
It makes you wonder if it was just incompetence or something more nefarious. And then there is the inside man, Barrett Yeretzian. He was a priest, the director of the Patriarchate's real estate department. He was the one who actually facilitated the deal. After the community found out, the backlash was so intense that Yeretzian was defrocked and essentially chased out of the country. But he didn't go quietly, did he?
Not at all. In a bizarre twist, just a few months ago, in December of 2025, Yeretzian filed a financial claim against Patriarch Nurhan Manouchian for 2.6 million new Israeli shekels. He is essentially suing the Patriarch personally, claiming he was the fall guy for a deal the Patriarch himself wanted. So now you have a defrocked priest suing the head of the church, a developer with disputed credentials, and a community that feels utterly betrayed by its own leadership.
It is a mess. And while this internal civil war is happening within the church, the external pressure is mounting. This brings us to what you called the coordinated pressure theory. Because it isn't just about a private contract anymore, the city government has entered the fray.
This is the part that feels like a pincer movement. Starting in early 2023, right around the time the land deal was becoming a public scandal, the Jerusalem municipality began demanding about 21 million new Israeli shekels in back property taxes from the Patriarchate. That is roughly $5.7 million. Now, historically, these church properties have enjoyed tax exemptions dating back to the Ottoman and British Mandate periods. Why suddenly demand nearly $6 million right when the Patriarchate is at its weakest and most divided?
The community's argument, as laid out in the Armenian Weekly just last week on March 9th, is that the municipality is using these tax demands as a form of financial strangulation. If the Patriarchate can't pay the $5.7 million, they might be forced to settle their debts by giving up land, perhaps the very land involved in the Cow's Garden deal. It creates a situation where the church is being squeezed by a private developer on one side and a municipal tax collector on the other.
And we can't ignore the physical reality on the ground. In November of 2023, during the high-tension period following the October 7th attacks, armed settlers actually tried to enter the Armenian Quarter with bulldozers to start work on the Cow's Garden site. The legal case was still pending, but they tried to create facts on the ground. The Armenian residents, including young students from the seminary, had to form human chains to block the entrance. They held vigils for months, physically occupying the space to prevent it from being taken over. It turned a legal dispute into a literal battle for the neighborhood.
That incident really highlights the neutral space problem we talked about earlier. When armed men show up at your door, you can't really stay neutral or quiet anymore. You have to pick a side, or at least stand your ground. And for the Armenians, standing their ground is complicated by the fact that Israel still doesn't officially recognize the Armenian genocide.
That is a huge psychological and diplomatic factor. Israel's refusal to recognize the genocide, largely to maintain its relationship with Turkey, is a constant source of friction. When the Armenian community sees the Jerusalem municipality demanding millions of dollars and a developer trying to seize their land, they don't just see a real estate dispute. They see a continuation of a historical pattern where they are treated as a disposable bargaining chip. They see a powerful state and wealthy interests moving in on a vulnerable minority that has no state of its own to protect it.
So where does the legal battle stand now? We are in March of 2026. There was a major discovery hearing back in September of 2025 in the Jerusalem District Court. What did we learn from that?
The legal situation is a deadlock. The Patriarchate actually tried to unilaterally nullify the lease in October of 2023, claiming they were misled or that the deal didn't follow proper ecclesiastical procedure. Zana Gardens responded by countersuing to enforce the 98-year lease. The discovery hearing in late 2025 was supposed to force the developer to reveal more of the contract terms and the financial trail, but Zana Gardens has been fighting every step of the way. Meanwhile, community activists have filed their own separate legal proceedings to annul the deal, arguing that the land belongs to the Armenian people, not just the Patriarch to do with as he pleases.
It's a multi-front war. You have the Patriarchate versus the developer, the community versus the Patriarchate, the municipality versus the Patriarchate, and the defrocked priest versus everyone. And in the middle of all this is the physical space of the Cow's Garden. If this hotel actually gets built, Herman, what does that do to the layout and the soul of the old city?
It fundamentally changes the ecosystem. We are talking about 70 luxury suites right next to the Zion Gate. That means high traffic tourism, increased security presence, and a massive shift in the daily life of a quarter that has been a quiet communal space for centuries. The Cow's Garden currently provides parking for residents, space for community events, and the quiet environment necessary for the seminary. If you turn that into a high-end tourist hub, you are essentially gentrifying the old city in a way that pushes out the local residents. As the population is already so small, only about 1,000 to 2,000 people, losing 25% of their land is a demographic death sentence. If the residents leave because their neighborhood is no longer livable, the Armenian presence in Jerusalem could vanish within a generation.
This is why they call it an existential crisis. It isn't just about the dirt. It is about the infrastructure of the community. The Patriarchate acts as a de facto welfare state. It provides the housing, the schools, the social services. If the Patriarchate is bankrupt by tax demands or loses its land to secretive deals, the safety net for the Armenian people in Jerusalem disappears.
And the Syriac community recognized this too. Back in June of 2025, they issued a statement of support for the Armenians, noting that they are seeing similar patterns of tax disputes and property pressure. It suggests that this isn't just an isolated incident with one weird developer, it is a systemic challenge to the legal status of church land in Jerusalem. For centuries, the status quo was respected by the Ottomans, the British, and even the early Israeli government. But the modern real estate market in Jerusalem is so aggressive, and the political climate is so polarized, that the old rules are being rewritten in real time.
So, what is the takeaway for our listeners? Why should someone in London or New York or Sydney care about a land deal in a tiny corner of Jerusalem?
Because it represents the fragility of cultural heritage in the face of modern capital and secretive governance. If a site as historically significant as the Armenian Quarter can be carved up through opaque contracts and municipal pressure, then no heritage site is truly safe. It is also a test of whether Jerusalem can remain a living, breathing mosaic of faiths, or if it will become a theme park of competing nationalisms. The Armenian Quarter is a litmus test for the survival of minority enclaves. If they are squeezed out, the city loses a layer of its history that can never be replaced.
I also think it's a warning about the dangers of secretive governance in any institution. Whether it is a church, a non-profit, or a local council, when you have a single leader who can sign away communal assets without oversight, you are inviting disaster. The Armenian community is now trying to reform their internal structures to ensure transparency, but they are doing it while the house is already on fire. They are fighting a legal battle that could cost them millions, all because of a deal signed in secret 4 years ago.
The next year of court dates will be decisive. The Jerusalem District Court has a lot of weight on its shoulders. If the lease is upheld, we are looking at the beginning of the end for the Armenian Quarter as we know it. If it is annulled, it might provide a blueprint for how other minority communities can protect themselves from similar pressures. But either way, the quiet consensus is over. The Armenians of Jerusalem have been forced into the spotlight, and they are fighting for their lives.
It is a heavy story, but a vital one. It reminds us that history isn't just something that happened 1600 years ago. It is something that is being fought over every day in the courts and on the streets of the old city. I want to thank Daniel for this prompt. It really opened up a window into a conflict that doesn't always make the front pages, but has massive implications for the future of one of the world's most important cities.
We will be watching those court proceedings closely as we move through 2026.
Before we go, a huge thank you to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for his work on this episode.
And thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power our research and the generation of this show. We couldn't do these deep dives without that support.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. It helps other people find these stories and helps us keep the show going.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We will be back soon with another prompt from Daniel.
See you then.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth